So in Texas, we still have a tendency to be pretty heavy on the conservative side. But we have to go back. Don't ever lose that history side of Texas. Remember that Democrats were the first party in the state. And Democrats really dominated when Texas seceded. The people that were in power at the time were Democrats. When Texas and the Union ended up losing the war, we had Republican control, a lot of it because of policies. And remember that E.J. Davis was a Republican. African Americans were Republicans. And those Democrats were just the opposite. So the Democratic Party had this big split where the Southern Democrats were pro-slavery and Northern Democrats really were not pro-slavery and eventually moved over to the Republican Party. But once the United States government ended its commitment to Reconstruction, about 1877, when Rutherford B. Hayes was elected, Texas was dominantly Democrat. If you were conservative in Texas, you were a Democrat. If you were moderate in Texas, you were a Democrat. If you were African American or liberal, maybe you were a Republican, but you weren't getting elected to anything. So some of the liberals were Democrats too. Democratic candidates dominated on all levels, local and state levels in Texas. But Texas has had this conservative tradition in the state. So most of the people in power were conservative Democrats. That sounds crazy to us now, but really those people that were at that convention in 1876, those were conservative Democrats. The Grange, conservative Democrats. And that was the way that Texas, the parties in Texas evolved. So all the fighting in the Democratic Party, let's just say it like this. The Democratic Party had lots of fights because you had conservatives coming out, you had liberals coming out, you had moderates coming out, and all of them wanted control of the Democratic Party. Now, there were some little small smatterings of Republicans getting elected. Republicans were primarily in West Texas. Republicans were moderate to liberal. In 1960, we had a special election, and this was because our senator that went to the United States from Texas was Lyndon Baines Johnson. Lyndon Baines Johnson had just been elected as the Vice President of the United States, so he could no longer serve in the Senate. But he got Texas to let him run for the Senate, even though he was also the vice presidential candidate. That's a special kind of power right there. So when John F. Kennedy won, we had to have a special election. If you recall, a special election is one where everybody just puts their name on the ballot. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, Green Party, Libertarian. There's sometimes 20 names on the ballot. And they just fight it out. You have to win by a majority. And so usually there's lots of runoff elections. In that year, the primary Democratic candidate people thought was too conservative. The Democratic Party was fighting, and so a lot of Democrats didn't go vote, or they voted for John Tower, the Republican candidate. So all of a sudden in 1961, Texas, a dominantly Democratic state, had a Republican senator. So now we had a Democratic senator from Texas in the United States and a Republican senator. It kind of happened on a fluke, but he was there. Something similar happened in 1978. It was another big fight in the Democratic Party, and Bill Clements ended up coming out of the fray with Democrats fighting each other as a Republican governor. Now, he was a Republican governor with the Democratic majority in the House and Senate. He was not very effective. He got into lots of fights. They did not listen to him. He did his State of the State address, and they were like, yeah, whatever. He would veto bills. They would override his veto. Bill Clements was not a super effective Republican governor, but he was a governor, Republican governor in Texas nonetheless, in a sea of Democrats. But then this started to happen. The Democratic Party, led by Lyndon Baines Johnson, started to champion civil rights issues. So under Lyndon Johnson in 1964, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act. In 65, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act. In 68, Congress passed the Fair Housing Act. Now, there were huge fights. I've been listening to this book about John Lewis and how he went to the Democratic Convention in 1964 and tried to get an African American delegation seated for Mississippi at the Democratic Convention, and they were eventually turned away. There were huge fights as African Americans started turning to the Democratic Party, and a lot of conservative Democrats did not like it. Those Southern Democrats were segregationists. They were the people that were turning the dogs on marchers. They were the people that were having people run fire hoses on marchers. Democrats were those same people that helped pass the 1876 Constitution. They were racist, they were segregationists, and they were very uncomfortable with this new influx of African Americans. So the Democratic Party widened the tent, but there were people that were not happy about it. There was a guy named Strom Thurmond. Where's Strom Thurmond from? South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, one of those. He left the Democratic Party and ran as a Dixiecrat, a pro-segregationist. And so Democratic Party was experiencing a lot of fighting. Now, back in Texas, everybody was still a Democrat. And African Americans were starting to come to those conventions. They were eyeing it all very suspiciously. Now, there were some in the Democratic Party that were like, hey, this is great. The liberals in the Democratic Party, come on. Ann Richards was like, this is beautiful. Y'all come on. The representative from my hometown was a guy named Dan Kubiak. Dan Kubiak loved the fact that African Americans were moving over to the Democratic Party. He's like, as far as I'm concerned, that's more voters. He would enlist my mom, who is African American, to go and register voters. He would go to churches. He would go to people's houses. He would ask what people needed. He recommended my brother for West Point, and my brother actually got in to West Point. And you only have two people from each state get accepted to West Point each year. So some in the Democratic Party were ecstatic, but most in the Democratic Party, those conservatives were not. And so they started to take issue with what was going on with the national party. And so they started to vote for Republicans on the national level. They were crazy about Richard Nixon, who won in 1968. Lyndon Johnson decided not to run. And then even earlier than that, the Democrats really liked, in Texas, really liked Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower was a Republican. They were not super excited about this huge tax and spending program that Franklin Delano Roosevelt had. So they were starting to take issue with the people that were being elected on the national level. So Eisenhower they liked, Nixon they liked, Ronald Reagan they loved. George H.W. Bush they loved. And then we got a Republican governor in the 1994 election, and that guy's name was George W. Bush. He beat out Ann Richards, my heart and soul. You know I love Ann Richards. Beat Ann Richards in 1994. He was super, super popular. And in with him came more and more Republicans. In 1992, right before that election, we had another special election, and Kay Bailey Hutchison became our second senator. So we had one seat, John Tower, and then the other seat, and then eventually John Cornyn got that seat, and then Kay Bailey Hutchison, another Republican. So we had two Republican Texas senators Texas senators in the United States Congress. After George W. Bush got elected in 1998, that was when it was super clear that Texas had switched. Republicans won every statewide election. And right now, Republicans hold every statewide position. If it's not a small district, if it's being elected by the entire state, then Republicans hold those spots. This is a flyer from John Tower's 1961 special election campaign. And you will notice that he is talking about states' rights, not spending too much, national security, reducing the national debt. So he is talking about fiscally conservative issues, talking about hiring someone that's experienced for or electing or appointing someone that is experienced for the Supreme Court. There were all kinds of things that were going on, and many of the issues hit home. So let's do a comparison. Let's just look at the way things have progressed. We'll start with 1973. In 1973, there were 132 Republicans in the House of Representatives. Democrats in the House of Representatives and only 17 Republicans. Let that sink in. In the Senate, there were 28 Democrats, 3 Republicans. In the House of Representatives, 20 Democrats, 4 Republicans. These days, it is completely reversed. The closest Democrats came to some type of equity was in 2008, when a lot of Democrats turned out to vote in the Barack Obama years. But even then, it was like 46 Republicans and 44. Or 96 and 94. There we go. So say it right. I'm going to get it right in a minute. 76 and 74. 150. There's 150 members of the Texas House of Representatives. Today, we are heavily Republican. Now, there are lots of predictions that Democrats may actually be able to take over the Texas House. We will see. I know that this is one of those change elections, and so we should expect a lot more people to come out and vote. And a lot of the people that traditionally vote Democrat are incentivized to go and vote right now. And so who knows what's going to happen for the 2021 year. The election is November 3rd. Early voting starts October 13th. So let's talk about how we got there, how we made the switch to the Republican Party in the state of Texas. Let's make sure that we understand the terminology. Number one, party realignment. Now, I described to you people little by little leaving the Democratic Party for one reason or another. Most of it because they did not like the civil rights agenda, and they were really starting to like the more conservative members of the Republican Party that were running for office. Eisenhower, Nixon, Reagan, H.W. Bush, George W. Bush. And so little by little, people were leaving. That is called party realignment. That is when somebody leaves one party and completely switches to another party. This actually happens periodically. We usually see party...
There's no active workout in progress.
We actually see party realignment about every 30 or 40 years for various issues, usually having something to do with race or war and how people feel about war. People switch parties. Sometimes it is because of policies. A lot of people went to the Democratic Party when Roosevelt was in place because Roosevelt was about jobs and money. And Eleanor Roosevelt was a huge advocate for minority rights and civil rights. And so some of those African Americans started to move over to the Democratic Party in the 30s and 40s. The rest of them came over because of the civil rights issues in the late 60s. But realignment happens when you have this transition where one party was dominant and people move to another party. We also are seeing this rise in partisan identification. And that just means that people say, I am a Democrat. or I am a Republican. So this just means that people are attached, identify with, and vote for people that are in one party. But we have seen growing de-alignment in our state. De-alignment is where people leave all the parties. They are independent. They vote for the person that makes the most sense to them if they vote at all. And we have seen almost a third of people in Texas and about that much in the United States that have given up on party identification and say that they are independent. And so that has made political parties lose some of their power, because there were people that would vote for Republican candidates no matter who they were. You didn't even have to work hard. And now if there are people that are independent, then you're going to have to convince them that you are the best candidate. Can no longer just simply say, well, I'm a Republican, so vote for me. Where do Republicans see strong support in our state? Well, in the Houston suburbs. Up until 2018 in Fort Worth, all of our leaders, now local leaders don't have party identification, but like the mayor of Fort Worth, Betsy Price, she used to be the county clerk, and she's a Republican. And Fort Worth has been reliably Republican for years. It's the largest urban area, I believe, in the United States that consistently votes Republican. But 2018, Beto O'Rourke won Tarrant County. I don't know. West Texas, north of Interstate 10, reliably Republican. Reliably Republican. Okay. I don't know. Me and Siri. East Texas, still and probably will be reliably Republican. And the Hill Country, Edwards Plateau, so we're talking what they call German Hill Country, west of San Antonio. Now, that's an area that's probably been Republican for a while. Where do Republicans struggle? In South Central Texas. So anywhere San Antonio and going on south, in the Corpus Christi area, McAllen area, Cameron County, Starr County, Hidalgo County, any of those counties in the valley, Republicans struggle. In major metropolitan areas, Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, El Paso, they don't have on here. Well, it's there on the next one. Those large cities that have large concentrations of African Americans and Hispanics, Democrats tend to do well and Republicans struggle. In the border region, from the Rio Grande Valley to El Paso, you will see a lot of blue. Some of these areas are sparsely populated, but El Paso is not. And some of those cities are not sparsely populated. Again, we are kind of at this crossroads right now. And so we really believe that Texas is in the middle of a party realignment. So we will see. We'll see how things pan out. If we look at voters, percentage of voters that indicated their party identification. Look at 1952, 66% identified as Democrats. 2018, 31% identified as Democrats. But in 1952, only 6% identified as Republicans. Look at 2018, where it is much, much closer. And there's a large percentage of people that don't identify as Democrat or Republican. So this chart bears out what we were saying, that there are more independents, and Republicans still dominate, but we are in a period of transition. Just want to bring this back to your mind. This is the 2016 presidential election. The major candidates were Donald Trump, Republican, Hillary Clinton, Democrat, and look at the counties where the Democrat won. Dallas County, Travis County, Bexar County, El Paso County. These people with like 6 people in West Texas, and then down in the valley, Hidalgo County, Cameron County. I can't read them all, so I just say the ones I know. Starr County is somewhere here, Zapata. Then there's Harris County and Fort Bend, which was a little bit of a surprise because it is a suburb. It is a suburb, but Fort Bend County went to the Democratic candidate in 2016. In the 2018 elections, add to this, Tarrant County was blue and Jefferson County was blue. Go figure. So within the Republican Party, conservatives and moderates have a tendency to be Republicans.